Hi, welcome to our latest bonus chat. This is from our pod recording looking back over Ospreys v Leinster. If you missed it, you'll find it on Apple, Spotify, and all the other usual places. Now, it's a Lions year, and 2 games into the Six Nations, the talk about possible starting 15s and who's on the plane are already happening throughout the rugby sphere. But for right now, we're going to revisit an angle that we've been harping on going way back to 2013 when we had a guest post from longtime babbling book message board poster Curate's Egg titled Lions, More Meh Than Meow. There's a link in the program notes. Basically, the question being asked is whether or not the Lions tours are still relevant in the professional age. And the questions have come from more and more people as we've gotten closer to the latest tours since then. Starting with yourself, Kieran, are the Lions a concept still worth continuing?
To be honest, I've long not been a fan of them, because I think certainly in its current guise, it kind of harks back to an era of where it would have nearly taken you a month just to get to Australia or New Zealand or South Africa to do a tour. So it was easier just to bring all four unions in the Triple Crown down to have the tour. So I don't think it's necessary anymore. I think it's an outdated thing. One thing I'd say is players need a rest at some stage, and I'm glad that the Lions Tour facilitates Ireland touring against the likes of Georgia, Romania, and Portugal, who have, along with Spain, qualified for the World Cup now. But I'd rather teams just have those tours anyway, where they can leave out the bigger players without this Lions tour, because I don't see the value in it aside from it being a branding thing and a case of, for me it's a case of keeping rugby within the elite nations. So I would often look at it like it's, again, you have the big three down south: South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. Whether South Africa are a true Southern Hemisphere province being in the URC anymore, it's a bit confusing. But I like, again, it's just keeping it kind of within that old guard of England, Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. Going down there, it's not really progressing the game in any kind of way. One thing I would say is, if we were playing, if you had a Six Nations combination team or Triple Crown combinations team playing against a Rugby Championship combination team, and you had an Africa Cup combination team playing against Pacific Nations Championship team playing against the South American qualifiers teams. If you did something like that, I could see more value in it, because at least it's more expansive and more exploring possibilities around rugby. But right now, I think it nearly takes a lot of the shine off. Like over the summer, there'll be World Cup qualifiers. There'll be the Asian Championships, the Africa Cup, and the South American qualifiers. And the Pacific Nations Cup. I don't know why World Rugby wouldn't want to focus on those things, to grow those things more than say, here's a cobbled together team made of four unions that we're going down there. It'll be interesting to see what Andy Farrell does. I think, from his point of view as current Ireland manager, who is returning to manage Ireland at the end of this, you'd wonder, if he's picking players over Ireland players, how they're going to feel about this. For me, if you're doing it, you have to pick the best players in each position. But at the same time, you'd wonder from Andy Farrell's point of view, might he be tempted just to kind of stick with almost established Ireland players and friends or something? Because would it upset some of his Ireland charges? But no, I haven't been a fan of it for a while, to be honest. I think it's very outdated. I think it goes back to a time when it was a lot more expensive and difficult to tour. If we're doing it, I'd rather it be against nations like the Pacific nations in the build up to the Pacific Nations Cup or something like that, rather than teams like New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, who aren't exactly underexposed in rugby. I Again, I could see a way of making it work that there is a combined rugby championship team, there's a combined teams from different competitions and stuff. I could see a way of that working, but I just don't really see a point in it. I think it takes a lot of the shine off. Like Ireland are going on a tour, that's not going to get as much attention as it should now, even though it's more important to Irish rugby. I'd rather the Irish starters just get a rest, to be honest. I wouldn't begrudge anyone if they feel it's an honour to go and play with the Lions. I absolutely wouldn't begrudge them that. Rugby players have short careers. But at the same time, I think it's nearly just still happening because it's always happened. I think it's it's been at this stage, it's a tradition, so it's still here because it's a tradition. So I don't think it really serves any purpose at all these days. But yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, it'll get viewership. I'm sure it'll probably get more casual fans, and there'll be rugby fans who will watch it just to watch it because it's on. But yeah, I haven't seen the purpose in it in a long time. I think just to sum up, I think it keeps the elite nations as they are and doesn't really do well to expand the game. I think it you need to give players a rest at some stage, and it hampers that as well because you could have Ireland's kind of match day 23 plus a few getting arrested somewhere, but some of them will be about 15 of them will probably be with the Lions. You look at it, doesn't exactly help the manager returning to his international side because when Andy Farrell goes back to take over the Ireland job, are there going to be are there going to be sour grapes about him not picking certain Ireland players? And yeah, I think it just takes the kind of attention away from games that are in reality more important, like World Cup qualifiers, like developmental tours. But no, I haven't been a fan of it for a long time, so I would say a resounding no. It's one of those pieces I nearly wrote several times for back in the Harpin on Rugby blog days. I never got around to, but no, for me it doesn't. I wouldn't be particularly interested in watching it. If it was on free TV, I'd maybe watch it. We know it's not, so for me, it doesn't really capture the imagination. So if that wasn't clear enough, I would say a resounding no. I don't particularly care about it.
Yeah, I mean, the three of us sort of chatted to it sort of on WhatsApp before we did this. I think we're all of a kind of a similar mind about it. So what we did was we opened out the conversation. We have a Discord channel with more commentators on it as well, and I tried to get some more opinions, and we got a few more that are leaning more towards keeping them. So I'll read them out. We have one from Gavin Hegarty who says, "I'm a big fan of it." This is a quote. "I'm a big fan of it. It's utterly unique in sport, let alone modern professional sport. It gives players and coaches a chance to learn from other nations. Usually Ireland learned the most, but this time I think it'll be the opposite. As a spectacle, players still refer to it as the pinnacle of the sport. It's also worth noting what happens when these players are away, like how many of our top players get capped during Lions windows." And we had Craig Grehan who says, "It's a great series. I love it. It brings such banter to the home nations, but in a friendly fire banter way." So, there are arguments to be made for it. And I'll just read out here without going on too much. I'll read out what I wrote in Discord. I said, "For me personally, test rugby is enough for the top level of the sport. No need for any all-star selections. I get the tradition and history behind the Lions, but at this stage, all it does is take 5 top-level nations off the board for 2 months every 4 years, a time which could be better spent with more matches between those nations, as well as more one-off matches with tier 2 nations. Sure, when the 2025 series is on, I'll follow it and cheer for the Lions, but I honestly don't think we'd miss it if there are regular test matches in its place." And of course, there's the added thing as well. There's the sponsorship. There's a lot of money that goes with it. There's a big association with HSBC. Not sure I'm crazy about an association with a bank like that, but that's a conversation for another day. But it does generate revenue. You could also argue that Australia, in particular, they need a successful tour. They need to be able to promote the game of rugby. It's in a particular dire situation where they are. But is that a reason for continuing this tour just for the sake of that? I don't know. But listen, Rich, it was actually yourself who introduced this topic to our WhatsApp group in the first place. So this is all your fault, really. What's your take on it?
I used to like the Lions,
Mm-hmm.
but then again, I've been watching rugby since the 1970s. When there was no World Cup, there was the Five Nations.
No Champions Cup.
You only ever got to see rugby for 5 matches once a year. The fact of the matter is that I am no longer a fan, and I haven't been for a while, for many of the reasons that Kieran has just mentioned. It doesn't do anything, and I get all the history. I get all the kudos that comes from the pissing competition that exists between players from different nations. And I am the better 10 out of the four nations instead of I am the best 10 in my one nation. I get all that. We're humans and we have our frailties, our ambitions, our egos. Does it do anything for the sport? Answer no, in my very own humble opinion. And it used to, it most definitely used to, because it exposed different styles of rugby against each other in a rugby bonanza, if you like. But now we have World Cups. There is absolutely no reason to have a Lions tour. Absolutely no reason to have a Lions tour. What you have in football is what they call the Mundialito, which is the FIFA World Club Cup or whatever it is, where the champion from each confederation of the footballing world comes together and plays. Well, if you want to have something similar, like Kieran's just alluded to, fine, go ahead. We all know what's going to happen. You're going to end up with a Northern Hemisphere and a Southern Hemisphere playing in the final, because clearly Asia Pacific, Africa, none of those are going to get even close. So, that would probably make that a bit of a damp squib. If you want to have something of that ilk and a competition as between the elite, the tier one nations, then by all means, but have a Northern Hemisphere side and a Southern Hemisphere side, which does incorporate the South Africans and Argentina, and just have a one-off series every 4 years if you want, something like that. Does it achieve anything? No, other than bragging rights for 4 years. Well, that's what you have the World Cup for anyway. I'm not a fan, and I think that the main issue I have with it is the fatigue issue. Yes, it does expose the younger players to playing on tours that, the ones that are not selected, playing on tours that they wouldn't ordinarily go to at that stage in their careers. But you can do that anyway with an A side, with a Wolfhounds equivalent, which is what should be happening. If you want to expand the game, if you want to get the tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4 nations coming alongside and developing the game from a worldwide perspective, which is what World Rugby profess to do and never do, because it's all about money at the end of the day, which is what the Lions Tour is. It's a money spinner. Then put your money where your mouth is. Develop competitions, Churchill Cup equivalents, where you can develop these nations. Don't back something like the Lions Tour. I'm not a fan. I used to be, but I used to be when I was a rugby starved supporter, because it was the Barbarians games and it was the Five Nations and it was the Lions tours, and that was it. There was nothing else. There was never any rugby on television. So you were craving for these big events. But now you've got World Cups, you've got Champions Cup, you've got Challenge Cup, you've got the URC, you've got the Premiership Rugby, you've got the Super Rugby, you've got the Rugby Championship. It just goes on and on and on. Do we need another competition every 4 years? No, is the answer.
Yeah. Something's got to give, and I think that would be up among the leading candidates. All right. One little caveat. We definitely we're 3 thumbs down here, I think, pretty much. So if you disagree, let us know in the comments. If you think it's a tour that should be kept on. I think the 3 of us we'll be harping on the Lions tour when it comes. We're not going to turn our backs on it when it's happening. We love watching rugby, but we're not the ones out there playing. And like we say, player fatigue is a serious factor. But one caveat I will make is there's a women's Lions tour scheduled for 2027 in New Zealand, and I would sincerely want that to go ahead. The women's game is in a different different place at the moment. I think it would be a good fit. I think the brand would be a good fit for them to have a tour. What happens down the line in future, I don't know, but I think that tour in particular, I would be all for, and I think it'd be worth promoting. But we'll see how that do. But otherwise, I think the men's has had its day. It's a shame if they did pull the plug on it. I'm not saying they will. They're not going to do it just because we're saying it. But if they do pull the plug, it'll be a shame for those who are coming up, who have seen other people get capped for the Lions and then miss out on the chance. But there'll be more test caps available for them as well. So hopefully it'll even happen. Anyway, listen, that's a debate that's going to go on for a long time.